Welcome back. We head down to the U.S.-Mexico border where the two countries may be coming to some sort of a deal. NBC News is reporting both are weighing an agreement for Mexico to crack down on fentanyl in exchange for the U.S. stopping the flow of guns from going to the southern border. So as part of this deal, the Mexican military and police, with the help of U.S. law enforcement, would focus on cracking down on the synthetic opioid, tracking down the labs that are making the drugs, and go after key players responsible for trafficking fentanyl. Blaine Holt is a retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General, and Hung Hao is a retired U.S. Navy Special Operations Captain. Thank you both for being here. Let's start with General Holt. What do you make of this possible deal between the U.S. and Mexico?
Well, good morning, John. It's good to be with you. Look, on the surface value, it looks like a great idea that we would start cooperating after hundreds of thousands of Americans have died from fentanyl. I don't think anybody is against stemming the illegal flow of weapons in any direction. The problem is that the Mexicans have very little credibility in going and policing their own labs, policing their own cartels. The cartels are a plague for the Mexicans just as much as anybody, but they don't show any ability to get after that. In fact, they are probably compromised in some of the very higher levels of their own government from the cartels. So I'm very dubious about execution, but on its surface, it looks good.
And Captain Cow, I want to get your thoughts on that as well. What do you make of that deal?
Well, the best way to protect everything and to stop both weapons going down there and fentanyl coming across here is to actually have a border and a wall to protect both our countries and our interests.
General Holt, I want to get your thoughts on China making this move that they're going into Central America. China's establishing diplomatic ties with Honduras in the aftermath of breaking off relations with Taiwan. How do you see China and Honduras with this relationship, and how do they gain from having this type of tie?
It's just another brick in the wall. China's been very active in South America. They've been active worldwide. Part of their Belt and Road Initiative, John, led by this consortium called the BRICS, is to get after separating the United States from all of its traditional diplomatic interests. China has another goal diplomatically of surrounding and blanketing and isolating Taiwan and cutting it off from the rest of the world. So Honduras has finally buckled to the pressure. But I'll tell you that Honduras, Central America, South America, they're very worried about the loss of American leadership. They're very worried about the power vacuum created. And if we're not going to lead on the world stage, especially in our hemisphere, the Chinese are only too happy to step in and work towards their goals of eventually replacing the U.S. as world reserve currency.
And Captain, let's get your response to that as well. How do you feel?
Well, they've already fulfilled the Sao Paulo Forum, right? Basically turning all of South America into communist or socialist, with Brazil and Colombia, the last two, the cave. Now they're moving their way upwards. We also have to be careful what's going on in Africa. The Russians are controlling basically from Central Africa out west, and then from the Chinese are controlling from Kenya, Somalia, all the way out west also to meet the Russians. This is a two-pronged attack from allies or frenemies, right? They're doing this. They did this in Afghanistan. I saw this. They're doing this in Europe. They're doing this in South America, and so we need to be worried.
General Holt, let's switch gears here. Ukraine is demanding an emergency meeting with the UN over Russian President Vladimir Putin's plan to put nuclear weapons in Belarus. What steps can the UN take to intervene with this situation?
There's very little the UN can do. I think that overall, Vladimir Putin took advantage of some of the statements diplomatically that were made to challenge Lukashenko's power in his own country. But they've been beating the drums on moving those weapons for a very long time. Ukraine is very right to ask for a UN emergency session on this and look at it. The other things that Ukraine's going to do to make this advantageous to themselves is they're going to try to shine a spotlight on the actual support and logistics resupply they're receiving versus what is promised in nice Sunday talk shows. It's the two things are different, and Ukraine is in real trouble. I'm very worried that these are not just repositioning of weapons to show aggression. I'm very worried that these are part of an operational plan.
And Captain Cow, I'm going to give you the last word here on this.
The general's right. This is not a deterrence. I'm sure they'll say, hey, we do the same thing in our allied countries, but that's part of the NATO treaty. However, they're doing this as part of aggression. Also, like I said, going back to China, they're putting missile systems in containers that can go on any merchant ship out there, and we need to be careful because they've got these ships parked along the east and west coast of the United States that may have hundreds of missiles each in a container.
It's always a pleasure having you both, Captain Cow and General Holt. Thank you again for your time and for your insight on this.